don't think I've ever said this about a foster care memoir before, but Not to Blame is really bad. It's very badly edited, and it's also quite damaging. And I hope that nobody has taken advice from this book with a specific thing that happens. I'll talk about that with a spoiler warning in case you do want to read this, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. It's only half an hour. It's not a foster care memoir that would, keep you engaged for a long period of time. So really, you wouldn't be missing out on very much. This is a foster care memoir by Maggie Hartley, and I will say most of Maggie Hartley's other books are fabulous. I love them. They're brilliant. This one, I feel like the editor looked at it and went, "This takes about half an hour to read. Let's not bother doing a good edit on it." There's a typing error within the first, well, it's on the second page on the ebook. And I just thought, okay, if you're having typing errors on the second page, it doesn't really give me much hope for the rest of it. And honestly, there are so many errors in this. And I'm used to foster care memoirs sometimes having some typing errors because I'm of the mind they don't put their best editors on them because they're not exactly highbrow literature. But this one's terrible. The story itself is quite interesting for the most part. I'd say for the first two-thirds of it, it was pretty decent. It's about a girl called Rebecca, a 16-year-old girl called Rebecca, who comes to stay with Maggie because her latest foster care replacement has broken down. And we learn that Rebecca is quite an interesting individual. Sometimes she can be quite nice, but mostly she's very forgetful. She's lashing out a lot. She has what is described in the book as toddler tantrums, and to be honest, that's the best way to describe it. She's perfectly calm 1 minute and then she will just completely lose it for no obvious reason. She had a tantrum because of milk. And there are other examples in the book, and honestly, I kind of knew or I suspected what was going on straight away because of certain characteristics, the forgetfulness, the inability to absorb information properly, the emotional outbursts. I kind of, because I've read a lot of foster care memoirs and I've read a lot about these conditions, I kind of knew what was going on. I'm not entirely sure when this book was set, but she does have a mobile phone, so it's not as if it was set many, many decades ago. And I'm quite surprised that the condition that she might have, and I will talk about that in a moment, wasn't really obvious to anybody else because I feel like, at least after being in the care system for so many years, somebody should have connected the dots. But maybe this was set just when mobile phones were coming out, and maybe the condition wasn't as well known then as it is now. But it still surprises me. And actually, I read some reviews about this online after reading it, and quite a few people have said something similar, so it's a little bit alarming to be honest. Rebecca is hoping to get her own flat, but nobody thinks she's ready for this. I completely agree with that. And then they begin to dig a little bit deeper into her past. They want to know more about her mother. She wants to learn about where she came from, her biological mother. And as we learn more about what her mother was like, slowly the dots begin to get connected. And I was really surprised how they handled this. In fact, I was disgusted how they handled this. So, spoilers from now. I will go into detail about what this condition is and how it was handled. And all I can say is I really hope that this is fabricated for the purpose of the book because this is just a horrible, horrible, dangerous, damaging way of approaching it. So, once they learn, spoilers from now, as I said, once they learned that Rebecca's birth mother drank quite a lot when she was pregnant, Maggie started to come to the conclusion that Rebecca had fetal alcohol syndrome. And I thought, okay, well, this is what I was thinking as well. How has nobody else even considered this at this point? Because the signs are all there. There are, of course, other possible reasons for her behaviour, but if nobody's come to any conclusion at this point, then surely they would be exploring these avenues. So I was a little bit surprised that nobody else had ever even considered that. But once they started to realize that this might be the case, Maggie sat Rebecca down and said, and I'm going to say this not word for word, but I'm summarizing it pretty accurately. She said, "You have brain damage because your mother drank. You didn't do this. This is not your fault. She did it to you." I just thought, what an idiot. You can't just turn around to somebody, particularly a vulnerable 16-year-old, and say, your mother gave you brain damage. She's not a doctor. She can't diagnose the condition. It's just speculation. And this is before there were any medical appointments. I should point that out. This is literally in the book, it's like the same day or the next day after Maggie started to suspect this was the case. And then she turned around and said to her, your brain damaged because your mother drank. And I thought, how stupid. You can't tell somebody that without a medical diagnosis. That is so dangerous. And I'm so concerned, well, moderately concerned, that somebody will have read this book, recognized the symptoms in somebody they're caring for, and then just turned around and said, you behave the way you do because you're brain damaged. That's pathetic. That's ridiculous. Don't ever do that to somebody. I was just gobsmacked. If she'd sat down and said, look, we think there might be a reason for this, are you willing to see a doctor, maybe get some tests done, whatever? Absolutely. I think it's important that she's aware that there might be a reason for this. But just telling her straight, your mother did this to you, your brain damaged, like, what are you on? Like, that's just ridiculous. I couldn't get over how badly that was handled, and it really infuriated me. And I am, as I said, slightly concerned that somebody reading the book will think, okay, well, this is a foster carer who's looked after lots of children. Clearly, the book represents how to best handle this situation. This is the best way to do it. No, absolutely not. You should never tell a child they're brain damaged anyway, not as bluntly as that, particularly somebody who's a vulnerable 16-year-old who has a hard time understanding information anyway. And then you should never say, by the way, your birth mother did this to you without, allowing her to realize that her mother had, this illness. Maggie did say at one point, people drink, it's sometimes not their fault, it is a condition, it's an illness, alcoholism is something that's very difficult. She did say that on one occasion, but given that Rebecca doesn't necessarily latch on to the correct information, that wouldn't have made any difference. So it's actually a terrible book. It's badly edited and it's very short. I feel like it was rushed through just to, get it out there and make the money from it. And it's not even very helpful. It doesn't really go into that much detail about the symptoms of fetal alcohol syndrome, so I don't think it would be very useful. There are, as I said, enough with Rebecca that I could kind of recognize that this was probably what was going on because I've read other books. But if this is your introduction to fetal alcohol syndrome, it's not going to help. It's not going to provide you with enough information to know more about it. So I didn't enjoy it. It's badly edited. It was clearly a rush job to get it out for the publishers to make more money. And honestly, I feel like it could do more harm than good. I definitely don't recommend it.